She married him for peace, because every warship above her world had taught at her that love was a luxury for queens with safer skies. Princess Soraya Vare stood beneath the marriage arch of living crystal, while 20,000 nobles watched from the glass terraces, and 300 billion citizens watched through frightened broadcasts. Beside her stood the human chosen by treaty, Lord Commander Adrian Graves of Earth. Not young, not beautiful in the royal way, not dressed in victory silk or jeweled armor, only a black formal coat, a plain iron ring, and eyes so quiet they made the ceremony feel less like a wedding and more like a battlefield waiting for orders. Soraya had agreed to marry him because Earth controlled the Western Corridor, and Aurelian needed those grain lanes before famine turned its border moons into tombs. She expected a polite hostage husband, a useful symbol, a man who would smile at banquets, bow before ancestors, give the treaty a face, and never touch the machinery of power. The court expected even less. They whispered that humanity had sent a tired widower with gray at his temples and scars, hidden poorly beneath ceremony gloves. They laughed behind fans of pearl glass, because the Star Court had asked Earth for a prince, and Earth had sent a man who looked as though peace had already disappointed him. Only the Earth delegation did not laugh. Their diplomats stood rigid. Their soldiers watched Adrian's hands. And when the priest asked whether any soul objected to the union, even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Soraya noticed then that the humans were not proud of their groom. They were afraid of him. Adrian turned his head slightly, as if hearing a weapon charge in a distant room, and every Earth officer in the front row lowered their eyes. That was the first crack in the beautiful lie of the marriage. Soraya had not been given a hostage. She had been given a warning wrapped in vows. The court thought she had married a bridge between worlds, but Earth had sent the man they prayed would never need to cross it. Soraya spoke the ancient vow with the discipline of a ruler raised under assassination screens. I bind my breath to peace, my crown to treaty, my house to the life beside mine. Adrian repeated the words softly, his human accent roughed around the royal vowels. I bind my breath to peace, my name to restraint, my hands to what must not happen again. The priest hesitated because that last line was not in the ceremony. And across the arch, the Earth ambassador closed her eyes as if a sealed tomb had opened. Soraya kept smiling for the broadcast because queens were trained to bleed privately. She placed the crown ring of Aurelian on Adrian's finger, a band of living silver that tightened around his hand and tasted his blood for loyalty. The court waited for it to glow gold, as it had for every consort in 900 years. Instead, the ring turned black. Not dead, not broken. Black as sealed space. A gasp rushed across the terraces. Lord Vareth, Soraya's cousin and most polished enemy, leaned toward the nobles and whispered that even royal blood rejected the human. Adrian only looked at the black ring and said, "Interesting," as though ancient judgment were a mechanical problem. Soraya asked the priest what it meant. The priest swallowed. "It means the ring found no ambition it understood." Adrian glanced at Soraya. "Ambition is loud," he said. "I learned quieter hungers." The court did not know what to do with that, so it chose laughter. And laughter was always the first shelter of frightened fools. The feast began beneath a ceiling of captured starlight. With music written for marriages that had failed to stop older wars, nobles came forward with gifts, moon pearls, treaty blades, singing birds from Vale's oceans, each gift an insult-wearing perfume. Lord Vareth presented Adrian with a child's ceremonial sword and said, "For our human prince, since Earth has sent us innocents in military clothes." The court laughed too quickly. Adrian accepted the little blade, tested its balance, then handed it to a shaking page and said, "Keep this under your sash. The man beside the third pillar has a needle pistol." That was when the feast learned that death had entered the room, and only the mocked human had noticed its shoes. The laughter died so hard, the musicians lost rhythm. Guards turned. The man at the third pillar reached for his sleeve, and Adrian threw a dinner knife without standing. The blade pinned the assassin's wrist to the pillar before the weapon cleared cloth. The attacker shouted in Carvax, "Poison for the peace bride." then bit a false tooth and died foaming on the marble. Soraya rose, heart hammering beneath wedding armor. The captain of her security stared like a child caught sleeping at the gate. No one had seen the assassin. No one but the husband everyone had decided was harmless. Adrian did not preen. He looked annoyed, as if murder during dinner were discourteous scheduling. Lord Vareth demanded how the human had known. Adrian said, "Servant shoes, infantry shoulders, heavy left sleeve," and he watched the soup instead of the queen. Then he told the servants to move the little page away from the spill pattern before she fainted. By midnight, the palace was still pretending to celebrate because stopping would admit fear. Soraya summoned Adrian to the private observatory where rulers of Aurelian had confessed disasters for centuries. Rain slid down crystal walls and turned the city lights below into trembling rivers. She asked him plainly, "Who are you?" Adrian stood with hands folded behind him. "A husband by treaty, a commander by old habit. A citizen under restraint." She hated the answer because it sounded prepared. She demanded why Earth feared him. His mouth tightened. "Earth fears memory, Your Highness, and I am inconveniently hard to forget." She held up the blackened consort ring. "This reacted to you like a locked gate." "Maybe it recognized another prison," he said, and she saw something behind the quiet then. Not cruelty, not arrogance, something caged and awake. She asked what he would do if the Carvax broke the treaty and came for her throne. Adrian turned from the glass and said, "I will try to keep my vows." "Which vows?" "The wedding vows," he answered, "and the older ones, for the first time since childhood." Soraya understood that some promises were more frightening than threats. Morning brought bad reports. 3 grain convoys delayed. 2 listening posts, dark. 1 moon governor missing. All small wounds placed exactly where the peace treaty was weakest. The council assembled in the dawn chamber beneath banners bright enough to insult the news. Lord Vareth claimed Earth had staged the assassination to make its groom seem useful. Admiral Celis demanded permission to seize the western corridor before Earth could close it. High Priestess Mora warned that the Black Ring was an omen. And every noble found a different way to say panic while pretending to advise. Adrian stood behind Soraya's chair because consorts had no voice in war council unless invited. She felt him there like a locked door at her back, steady, silent, infuriatingly calm. When Varath suggested placing him under ceremonial guard, Adrian said, "You should not say ceremonial when you mean armed. It makes you look dishonest and inefficient." Several ministers gasped. Vareth smiled with all his teeth and asked whether this was Earth's courtesy. Adrian answered, "No, Earth courtesy would have waited until after breakfast." Soraya raised one hand before the chamber caught fire, then asked what he saw in the border reports. Adrian stepped to the table and rearranged the holographic markers with 2 fingers. The convoy delays were timing hooks. The dark listening posts formed a corridor. The missing governor controlled emergency access to orbital mirrors. Carvax was not preparing invasion yet. They were preparing scandal, coup, or both. Admiral Celis scoffed that one human could not read an empire from missing lights. Adrian did not look up. "I read fear from men pretending the dark is weather." The room fell quiet because the old human had named the thing everyone else dressed in strategy. Soraya ordered a palace communications audit. The ministers resisted. The priests requested ritual exemptions. Adrian requested laundry records, and every noble stared as though madness had learned paperwork. He said traitors hide in sacred channels, but cloth crosses every guarded door. Find the robes washed outside normal cycles. Find the hands that touch them. By dusk, they found Carvax ash cipher sewn into noble hymns, and a route schedule for Soraya's public blessing ceremony. Silence answered for every denial, and Soraya heard treason breathing behind the curtains. Asterisk, the blessing could not be cancelled without making the treaty look dead. So Soraya rode through the capital beside Adrian in an open sky carriage, surrounded by shield birds and armored lilies. Aurelian city spread beneath them in terraces of gold stone and river glass, millions filling the plazas, some cheering, some silent, some watching the human groom as if he were a famine omen with shoulders. Children lifted painted signs asking whether Earth would bring bread. Veterans touched old wounds as Adrian passed, and priests scattered blue petals that stuck to his black coat like pieces of a kinder sky. Soraya waved until her wrist ached. Adrian did not wave. He watched windows. Rooftops, sewer grates, birds flying against the wind, and faces of people who were not looking at the queen. She whispered that he could at least pretend to enjoy his wedding procession. He replied, "I am enjoying the fact that no one has fired yet." She almost laughed, then saw his eyes narrow. The sky carriage crossed the bridge of 7 crowns when all the shield birds dropped at once. Not destroyed, commanded to sleep. The crowd roared. A section of bridge opened beneath the carriage, and 6 Carvax kill drones rose from below like black insects. Rom. A wound. Adrian moved before the royal guards understood the sky had changed. He shoved Soraya flat, wrapped his coat around her head to block shrapnel, and fired a pistol she had not seen him carry. 2 drones fell. One exploded against the carriage shield. One cut the driver in half, and the carriage tilted toward open air. Soraya reached for the control rail. Adrian caught her with one arm, and the dying driver's reins with the other. Steering the panicked sky beasts into a controlled crash through a fountain terrace, stone, water, petals, screams. Everything broke white around them when Soraya opened her eyes. The peace husband was standing over her with blood on his face and murder already leaving the room. He did not chase the attackers, which confused the surviving guards until later, when they learned the drones were bait. Instead, he lifted Soraya, checked her neck, her eyes, her hands, then ordered the north exit sealed and the south opened. He had not saved her by killing quickly. He saved thousands by understanding how panic wanted to move. Captain Rollin protested that closing exits would trap citizens. Adrian snapped, "North is where they want panic compressed. Open south and push music through the speakers. People run slower toward songs." Soraya repeated the order with royal authority, and the plaza did not become a killing ground. Old wedding hymns poured through cracked speakers, warped by static, and the frightened crowd flowed south instead of crushing itself against the assassin line. Carvax shooters hidden in vendor towers found no dense target, only moving streams thinning through market lanes. Adrian took a rifle from a fallen guard, shot 3 tower braces, and dropped the nests without firing into the crowd. Then he vanished into fountain smoke. Soraya shouted his name before she could stop herself. He returned 7 minutes later, dragging a living attacker by the collar. The captive was young, shaking, missing one boot, and so terrified of Adrian that he confessed before Soraya even spoke. The operation had been funded through accounts tied to Lord Vareth's military charity, meant to kill the queen and frame Earth for failing to protect its own bride. Soraya looked at the captive and felt rage beg to become cruelty. Adrian watched her carefully, as if the real attack were happening now. She asked why he had spared him. "Dead men confess only to people who already agree with you." Adrian said, "Living cowards embarrass their employers." That night the city chanted her name, then his. Awkwardly at first because human names sat heavily in Varethi mouths. Adrian Graves, Adrian Graves, Adrian Graves. The Earth ambassador turned pale when the chant reached the palace. Soraya noticed, because fear had become legible to her. She summoned Ambassador Helen Ward to the Moon Chapel and demanded the sealed file. Ward refused until Soraya placed her iron wedding ring on the altar and said, "He is my husband by your treaty, my consort by my crown, and my battlefield by your silence. Give me the truth, or leave my world before sunrise." Earth had not sent her a monster. Earth had sent her the man who had once put a leash on Apocalypse and never forgiven himself for knowing how. Ward unlocked a courier case beneath her ribs and projected a file without sound. Soraya saw a younger Adrian standing in ash rain before a ruined Earth city. Fleets burning above Mars, human capitals under martial quarantine, and titles stamped in black covenant mutiny. Civil extinction probability. "The Graves Protocol," Ward spoke softly, "during our last internal war. 12 factions prepared planet killers for launch. Adrian took command without authorization, disabled every launch chain, imprisoned his own superiors, destroyed 2 Allied command ships when they tried to fire through civilian zones, and forced ceasefire by threatening every government equally. Soraya stared at the silent images. He saved you. Ward nodded. Yes. And you fear him for it, Ward's voice broke. We fear that he was right. We fear that if he ever decides law is slower than survival again, we may not stop him. Soraya found Adrian later in the old armory beneath the palace, not arming himself, cleaning weapons neglected for generations, sleeves rolled, blood bandage fresh across his shoulder. Looking less like a prince than a mechanic working late on a machine that might save children, he knew at once. Helen showed you. Not enough, Soraya said. Never enough. Adrian set down the rifle. A young officer named Mara Vale had 3 minutes to stop a launch from the Atlantic Arcology. She asked permission to destroy the command ship controlling it. Permission passed through 6 committees while the targeting algorithm finished eating a city. I gave the order. The ship had 1,700 crew. The city had 9 million children. He said it without drama, which made it worse. Soraya asked whether he regretted it. Every morning, do you think you were wrong? No? The answer shook her more than regret would have, because he was not hiding behind guilt. He carried guilt and still refused the comfort of pretending failure would have been cleaner. She asked why he had agreed to marry her. Adrian looked at the black ring on his hand. Because everyone who knows my name hesitates, and hesitation can be negotiated into peace. Marriage had begun as treaty, but truth turned it into a battlefield where neither could retreat unchanged. Lord Vareth moved before dawn. Not with soldiers in the streets, but with law. He convened an emergency assembly and accused Soraya of surrendering sovereignty to an Earth war criminal. He played fragments of Adrian's file stripped of context, command ships destroyed, officers imprisoned, governments threatened. The nobles recoiled beautifully, exactly as rehearsed. High Priestess Mora declared the Black Ring proof that ancient powers rejected the Union. Admiral Silas demanded Adrian be placed in sacred custody pending tribunal. Soraya entered in armor beneath her royal cloak, Adrian beside her unarmed by law, though everyone now understood that unarmed was a technical state rather than a practical one. Vareth smiled as if grief had delivered him a throne. Cousin, annul the marriage, condemn Earth's deception. And the court will rally behind you. Soraya looked across the chamber at frightened nobles. Ambitious cowards, wounded soldiers, priests clinging to omens because omens required less courage than choices. She could survive by sacrificing Adrian. Earth might rage, but slowly Aurelian might unite briefly. The path was visible, polished. Traditional, rotten, Adrian said nothing. He had promised restraint, and restraint meant letting her choose even if the choice ruined him. Soraya lifted her iron ring. I married him for peace, she said. And now you show me who fears peace most. You call him war criminal because he stopped a war too powerful for polite men. Perhaps that is why polite men hate him. The chamber erupted. Mora cried blasphemy. Silas shouted treason. Vareth raised an annulment order already signed by half the high houses. Then the palace shields fell. The dawn chamber became a bowl of screaming light as the sky opened to reveal Karvak's ships dropping through cloud cover. Not raiders, not assassins. A full-strike spear hidden behind false treaty beacons. Vareth had not merely conspired with enemies. He had invited them to dinner. The marriage had been ceremony yesterday. Now it became chain of command. The first orbital strike hit the western tower, turning ancient crystal into bright dust. Nobles dove beneath benches, priests dropped relics. Admiral Silas froze, because war inside a chamber was different from war on a map. Adrian moved as if this disaster had been waiting in a queue, and its number had finally been called. He seized Vareth by the collar and slammed him against the assembly table. Where is the shield control override? Vareth spat blood and laughed. The Dominion will spare those who kneel. Adrian pressed one thumb into a nerve beneath his jaw, not theatrical, almost gentle. And Vareth's laugh became a scream. Soraya shouted his name. Adrian stopped at once, breathing hard. Restraint snapping back like chains, Vareth sobbed the answer. Old coronation vault, beneath the sun altar. Access through priest tunnels, Mora began to protest. Soraya drew a guard's blade and placed it at the priestess's throat. You will open every sacred door I ask for. Or your gods can explain why they needed locked corridors more than living citizens. They ran through tunnels older than the dynasty. Soraya, Adrian, Mora, 6 loyal guards. And Lord Vareth dragged half-conscious behind them. The palace shook above, dust falling like gray snow from carved stars. Adrian did not seize command. He kept asking Soraya the questions only a ruler would know. Which districts obey temple bells over royal bells? Which evacuation tunnels flood first? Which noble houses will defend their streets if properly flattered? He was not replacing her. He was extracting the ruler from beneath the crown at the first junction. Karvak's infiltrators breached from a maintenance lift, 6 armored shapes with blades humming. Adrian stepped forward with a broken spear from the wall display. A guard shouted that he had no armor. Adrian answered, "Neither does arrogance." The fight lasted seconds because he did not duel. He interrupted knees, wrists, throat seals. Pressure tubes, every strike placed where technology trusted itself too much. Some men protect by standing in front of bullets. Adrian Graves protected even the parts of Soraya's courage that no one else had noticed bleeding. The coronation vault was a cathedral beneath the palace. Built around the first engine core that lifted Aurelian's royal city from swamp into sky, the shield override sat beneath the sun altar, a crystal spine taller than a soldier. Guarded by religious locks and old blood codes, Mora opened them with shaking hands. Vareth laughed weakly from the floor. You are too late. The Dominion has the upper atmosphere. Your human cannot threaten them all. Adrian crouched beside him. You invited Karvax because you thought they feared me enough to bargain. Vareth smiled with red teeth. Everyone fears you, Graves. That is why peace with you is impossible. Earth chained you with marriage. Aurelian will chain you with scandal. Karvax will chain you with hostages, but you were born to break chains. So break them, kill us, seize command, save the day. Become the monster and prove us right. The vault seemed to wait. Soraya understood the true attack then. Not ships, not drones, but temptation dressed as necessity. Adrian could take over. Could hurt Vareth until every secret spilled. Could bypass law, could save lives perhaps, and every frightened government would forever say, "See, he cannot be trusted with peace." Adrian closed his eyes, hands shaking. Soraya stepped between him and Vareth, not because she feared him, but because he looked like a man holding a collapsing bridge alone. She pressed her black ring against his blackened silver one. "Let me carry the law," she said. "You carry the seconds." He opened his eyes and steadied. The shield override required royal blood and consort assent. Soraya cut her palm. Adrian pressed his ring beside hers, and the black and silver flared not gold, not royal blue, but deep human red spreading through the crystal like dawn seen through smoke. That was when Soraya stopped being the bride in his mission and became the ally in his restraint. Systems woke across the vault. Shield towers, orbital mirrors, civilian gates, emergency broadcast. All pleading for orders at once, Soraya began issuing commands. District shields up in rings, not domes. Hospitals first, palaces last. Reroute noble hangars to civilian lift craft. Lock private vault doors open. Yes, open. Let the people use them. Adrian fed her timing. Karvax drop. Craft entering thermal layer. Mirror 3 compromised. Palace East Wing, lost. Temple bells for low districts. Market lights for river terraces. The city responded, not elegantly, not fully, but enough. Shields rose like bruised glass over shelters. Private yacht pads opened to refugee queues. Ancient noble panic rooms became triage halls, and citizens saw their queen on every screen. Hair torn from wedding pins, blood on her palm, human consort beside her with ash across his mouth. She spoke without poetry. This is your queen. The treaty lives. The palace is under attack. Your life outranks every tradition today. Move to marked shelters. Obey street marshals. Help the person nearest you. We are not kneeling. The last sentence spread through the city like fire finding dry grass. Adrian did not speak until Soraya looked at him. He leaned close to the pickup and said, "Karvak's command, this is Adrian Graves. You know what my name means? Today it means you leave civilians alone. Or you learn why Earth still lowers its voice when I enter a room across the invasion fleet." Cruz heard his voice and remembered old nightmares wearing human skin. The Dominion slowed, not stopped, but slowed. Some captains hesitated before firing on civilian districts. Others requested confirmation. One landing wing veered away from a hospital shield because its commander had served at Red Meridian, where Adrian's ceasefire trap had left 3 Dominion cruisers powerless for 19 days, while human medics evacuated enemy and allied wounded alike. The wedding had been bait, and the bride had been meant to watch the trap close around her husband. Karvak's commander Rul Tavar entered the broadcast. Horned armor, white eyes, mouth carved into a soldier's permanent contempt. He ignored Soraya and addressed Adrian, Graves of Earth. "By Dominion warrant and memory of the Black Corridor, you are claimed surrender, and the Queen keeps her capital. Resist, and every royal child shelter becomes a crater." Soraya felt the room freeze around the phrase, child shelter. Karvak's intelligence knew about the underground nurseries. Adrian looked at Vareth, who smiled without sanity. "The children will be spared if we obey," the traitor whispered, Adrian said. "That lie has killed more worlds than weapons." Tavar leaned closer through static. "Earth muzzled you, human. They dressed you for marriage and handed your leash to a girl. Show us whether the Graves protocol still has teeth." Soraya stepped before the display. "I am Queen Soraya Vare of Aurelian." "You will address me." Tavar smiled. "Peace, bride." "You are a room he has been locked inside." "Nothing more?" Soraya lifted her bleeding palm. "Then listen through the door and cut the connection." She ordered the child shelters moved, but technicians said they were too deep for rapid evacuation. Adrian calculated in silence, then said, "No evacuation, swap signatures. Make empty royal vaults look like nurseries. Make nurseries look like coolant reservoirs. Give Tavar targets he is proud to threaten." The next hour became a war of lies. Heat lies, signal lies, surrender lies. Courage lies told to frighten citizens, because panic needed postponing. Truth kept only where it could work. The Dominion fired on false nurseries, destroying empty vaults and exposing their targeting rhythm. Admiral Silas used the pattern to cripple 3 strike craft. Refugee lifts cleared the lower districts. Temple bells guided market crowds into wine cellars opened by royal override. Noble estates became shelter halls by command. And the city was not saved yet, but it was participating in its own survival. That was the most terrible lesson of the day, to save innocence. They had to understand how monsters hunted it. The Dominion reached the inner vault by cutting through the sacred aqueduct. Water and smoke bursting into the lower shrine as Karvak's shock troops advanced behind shield mantles. Soraya ordered the last civilians out of the palace complex. Adrian asked for the antique rifles lining the shrine walls. Mora said they were ceremonial. Adrian said ceremony is just technology that forgot its manual. He armed the guards with museum pieces, whose projectile mechanisms could punch through Karvak's personal shields precisely because no modern defense expected old metal at close range. He showed them joints, breath filters, shield wrists. Never center mass, unless they wanted bruised pride and dead friends. The first wave entered under red emergency light, chanting conquest verses, and was met by royal history fired from dusty barrels. Thunder filled the enclosed shrine. Karvak's soldiers fell, not all enough. Soraya fought beside Adrian with a short blade because the queen could not command from behind the last door. He hated that, she could tell, but he did not order her back. They moved together awkwardly at first, then better, his left covering her right, her blade catching what his injured shoulder missed. A Karvak's officer lunged through smoke and caught Soraya by the throat. Lifting her against the altar, Adrian's pistol clicked empty. He threw the useless weapon into the officer's eye, stepped inside the blade swing, and drove the child's ceremonial sword from the wedding feast through the armor seam under the creature's arm. The officer collapsed. Soraya fell into Adrian, gasping. He handed her the tiny blade and said, "Useful gift," she laughed once, half sob, half madness, and kissed him before either of them could think. Brief, blood-tasting, smoke-covered. Nothing like royal romance, everything like choosing life. Then Rul Tavar came with the second wave, not as a hologram, but in black armor scarred with old human weapon marks. The court had mocked the child's sword, but in human hands even an insult could learn to defend a queen. Tavar cut through 2 guards, broke Mora's sacred staff, and kicked Adrian across the flooded stone hard enough that Soraya heard ribs crack. He moved like a younger war, all speed, cruelty, and certainty. He saluted Soraya with his blade, theatrically, then told his soldiers to take her alive and the human breathing. Adrian tried to rise and failed. Tavar stepped on his hand, crushing the blackened ring against stone. The consort ring flared red, then black again. Adrian did not scream, which made Soraya want to. Tavar leaned down. "Say the words, Graves. Declare emergency command. Override the queen. Seize the grid. Become the old monster, and perhaps you save her." Soraya understood the trap with perfect horror. The Dominion wanted him to repeat the Graves protocol under foreign cameras, to break Aurelian sovereignty, to make Earth's peace husband proof that humanity could not ally without domination. She stepped forward with the child's sword in one hand and the iron wedding ring glowing on the other. "He does not need to seize what I freely share," she said. Adrian's eyes widened. She placed her bloody palm on the shield grid crystal and spoke the oldest royal command. "Consort authority recognized as equal under mortal threat," the vault answered. The black ring on Adrian's crushed hand erupted in red light. Not rejecting ambition now, but accepting trust. The grid opened to them together. Not Adrian over Soraya, not Soraya using Adrian, but 2 authorities braided in crisis. He fed her the shape of war, she gave it lawful breath. They moved power from palace shields to street shelters, exposed the vault roof to lure Tavar's dropships lower, rerouted Orbital Mirror 3 through old festival reflectors, and transmitted false surrender codes in Vareth's private cipher. Tavar lunged for Soraya. Adrian caught his blade barehanded, buying 1 second. Soraya used that second to drive the child's sword into the exposed control node on Tavar's chest. Some chains are broken by force. Others become bonds only when both hands choose them. Admiral Celis, acting on their linked command, fired the northern battery through the open vault roof, not at the palace, but through the exact corridor where Tavar's command dropship hovered. The beam struck, reflected from festival mirrors, split into 3 white lines, and carved the dropship engines away without touching the city blocks beyond. The shockwave knocked everyone flat. Tavar's soldiers lost command signal. Palace guards surged. Mora, bleeding from the scalp, brought her broken staff down on a Carvax helmet and shouted a prayer that sounded suspiciously like profanity. Tavar staggered, armor dying, face exposed. He stared at Adrian with hatred and something like fear. "You could have ruled them," he rasped. Adrian stood with Soraya's help. "No," he said. "I could have ruled over ruins. Humans have done that before. We are trying to grow up." Soraya lifted the tiny sword to Tavar's throat. "By authority of the crown and treaty, you are my prisoner, not his trophy." The battle ended in pieces, never with one clean trumpet. Carvax forces lost command, then formation, then confidence. Some surrendered when promised medical treatment. Some fought until museum rifles and modern batteries persuaded them otherwise. Some fled into tunnels already mapped by palace children who knew better shortcuts than soldiers above the city. Dominion ships withdrew from low orbit under pressure from Earth's reinforcements finally arriving through the western corridor. Grain ships beside warships, because Earth apparently supplied bread and artillery with equal stubbornness. Aurelian City burned in 7 districts. The western tower was gone. The Bridge of 7 Crowns hung broken over the river, and the royal palace had a hole through its sacred heart large enough to see morning. Yet the child shelters lived. The refugee lifts had moved thousands. The coup leaders were exposed, and the queen remained on every screen with her human husband leaning on one shoulder. refusing to faint until the broadcast ended. That was how the Dominion learned the most dangerous thing about humanity. Not that humans could break worlds, but that the strongest among them could choose not to when trusted by someone brave enough to stand beside them. Soraya told the planet the truth, not polished, not complete, but honest enough to breathe. Lord Vareth betrayed us. Carvax attacked us. Earth stands with us. Our dead will be named. Our wounded will be tended. Our guilty will be tried. Our children are alive. And our peace will not be annulled by cowards. Adrian spoke only because she asked him to, and because the city needed to hear the feared name sound human. I was sent here to prevent a war. He said, I failed to prevent all of it. I will help you end the rest. No boast, no threat, no claim, just duty standing in ash. The broadcast ended, and then he collapsed, which annoyed him greatly. For 3 days the Empire waited outside the medical wing, as if peace itself were under surgery. Soraya sat with him through the first night, despite council demands, treaty calls, military briefings. In ancient rules about sovereign distance, he woke near dawn, pale and furious to be alive in the helpless way of soldiers who preferred usefulness to recovery. He asked casualty numbers before asking where he was. Soraya gave them because lying would insult them both. His face tightened at every district, every shelter, every guard unit. And when she finished, he whispered names. Not all, just the ones he knew. The driver, the page, the guard at the East Tunnel. Even Lady Arissa, before betrayal, consumed every memory of kindness. Soraya realized this was how he punished himself, remembrance instead of wine. Silence instead of sleep, he asked after Vareth. Awaiting trial, she said. Public, lawful, guarded from convenient suicide. Adrian nodded. Good. Do not let him become a martyr. Let him become paperwork, she laughed. Then cried because laughter opened the door grief had been pounding on. Adrian reached with his unbroken hand. Stopped before touching her face, still asking permission. She took his hand and pressed it to her cheek. Do you fear me? He asked. Yes, sometimes she answered. His eyes lowered, she continued. I also fear the sea, the throne, childbirth, betrayal, and the silence before reports arrive. Fear is not rejection, Adrian Graves, it is information. A marriage made for peace had survived its first war, which meant now the harder work could begin. The trials lasted 12 days and were broadcast without music. Vareth attempted eloquence, claiming he had acted to prevent human domination. But prisoners talked, ledgers talked, laundry records talked. And living cowards embarrassed their employers exactly as Adrian had promised. High Priestess Mora testified against him while wearing a plain bandage instead of ceremonial jewels. Admiral Celis confessed his cowardice and requested exile. Soraya gave him demotion instead, then assigned him to rebuild the northern batteries under civilian oversight, because disgrace with labor was more useful than exile with poetry. Carvax prisoners were treated under treaty law, a choice that made Dominion propaganda stumble. Because cruelty expected cruelty and found paperwork, Earth sent inquiries, then concerns. Then a formal request that Adrian return for review once medically stable. Soraya read it aloud in his hospital room. Adrian sighed. They used the phrase, medically stable. That means they intend chains with cushions. Soraya folded the paper. Then they should have negotiated with the woman holding the key. The Earth delegation arrived in formal gray. 6 diplomats, 2 admirals, 1 legal minister, and Ambassador Ward, looking as though sleep had become a hostile nation. The minister invoked recall statutes tied to the Graves Protocol. Soraya asked whether Earth considered her marriage valid. Yes. Whether Aurelian was a sovereign ally? Yes. Whether Earth had knowingly sent Adrian as treaty consort? Yes. Whether Earth intended to remove the Queen's lawful spouse without her consent after he helped defend her capital? The minister began a sentence that died under its own cowardice. Ward stepped forward and said, Earth does not know how to live with what he represents. Your Majesty, Soraya replied, then Earth may learn from Aurelian. We have lived too long with pretty monsters. An ugly guardian is almost refreshing. Adrian muttered that this was not as romantic as she thought. She ignored him. Earth did not stop fearing his name that day, but it began learning that fear could become responsibility instead of a cage. The agreement that followed did not free Adrian from consequence, and he did not ask it to. It created a joint restraint council, not to chain one dangerous man, but to ensure no ruler, human or Aurelian, could force one soul to carry apocalypse alone again. Adrian accepted on one condition: every meeting must include civilian advocates, engineers, doctors, and one randomly selected school teacher. The legal minister asked why. Adrian said, "Because generals make war sound tidy. Teachers remember desks." Months later, the second wedding took place. Smaller, stubbornly public, and unnecessary by law. Soraya insisted because the first ceremony had been a treaty under siege and she wanted one memory the enemy had not planned. Only the rebuilt bridge, citizens along the river, Earth's crane ships overhead, shield birds awake, and supervised. Adrian wore the same black coat repaired with visible silver stitching by palace servants, claimed it was fashion, and dared anyone to disagree. Soraya wore no crown until the final blessing. Only a white cloak sewn by refugee children with tiny iron rings along the hem. When Mora asked whether any soul objected, a shelter grandmother objected that the groom needed a cane. The bridge laughed. Adrian accepted one from a child. Then they spoke new vows. Soraya said, "I married you once for peace between powers. I marry you now for the peace we will build every morning." Adrian said, "I give you no promise that I am harmless. I promise you the truth of my harm, the restraint of my hands, the counsel of my fear, and what remains after memory takes its share." People wept because it was not pretty enough to be false. He placed the iron ring back on her finger. She placed the living silver ring back on his. And this time, it did not turn black. It glowed red, then gold, then settled into a dark shine like honest metal. The empire did not cheer because the groom was safe. It cheered because the queen knew he was not and chose partnership over illusion. Peace did not arrive like sunlight. It came limping, carrying repair budgets, prisoner exchanges, patrol charts, jurisdiction fights, delayed food shipments, Carvax tests, Earth oversight, and nobles discovering reform could be more frightening than invasion because it did not leave. Soraya and Adrian fought often. She accused him of expecting betrayal from every decorated sleeve. He accused her of believing symbolism could feed people if arranged beautifully. She called him impossible. He called her royal, which was worse. They apologized badly and improved anyway. Under their uneasy brilliance, Aurelian changed. Noble vaults became public shelters by law. Temple bells joined emergency networks. Military command required civilian evacuation planning. Every royal procession included crowd engineers, and the palace laundry became the most respected intelligence branch in 3 systems. Earth changed too, slowly, reluctantly. The Graves Protocol was rewritten, no longer secret shame, but a warning about governments that waited too long to be brave. Human cadets studied Aurelian's defense not as victory, but as restraint under shared authority. Adrian hated being taught in academies. Soraya enjoyed sending corrections years later. When Carvax envoys under white banners demanded concessions and asked whether, Aurelian still hid behind the feared name of Earth. Soraya smiled and answered, "No, we stand beside it." The envoy turned to Adrian, "And you, Graves, are you still leashed by vows?" Adrian lifted his hand, showing the ring that had once gone black and now held a steady ember glow. "Yes," he said, "be grateful." The chamber understood then that vows were not chains placed by cowards. Peace was not the absence of dangerous people, it was dangerous people choosing, every day, not to make the world smaller. She had married him for peace, then learned why Earth feared his name. And in learning it, she discovered the greater truth hidden beneath every scar. The galaxy did not need harmless heroes. It needed dangerous souls who could kneel beside the wounded, listen when trusted, stop when loved, and hold enough fear of themselves to keep choosing mercy when power begged to be used. And so the name Adrian Graves remained feared across Earth, cursed across Carvax, argued over in academies, whispered in council rooms, painted on shelter walls, and spoken softly by the children of Aurelian as the name of the man who came to a wedding dressed like a warning, caught murder by the wrist, taught a queen that peace had teeth, and proved that humanity's most terrifying weapon was never rage, never conquest, never the willingness to burn. It was the unbearable discipline of holding fire in both hands, feeling the old world beg for violence and saying, "Not today."